So in this passage then, McNulty's relationship with the reader is closely and firmly established. We really get a sense in quite a modernistic way of the self-consciousness of creating this text for entertainment purposes. But at the same time, it also kind of resonates with a sort of oral tradition, a sense of an Irishman telling a story, as we know the Irish are famous for doing. So so he starts off then in the past tense. He strode over his spanking new floor. So a nice little bit of chattiness there to emphasise in that adjective just how new it was. In his noisy boots, and he opened the door into his office. It had a sign on it, office, so we knew. So, I mean, is this a deliberate attempt to make us laugh, or to sort of kind of ground ourselves in reality, in this sort of absurd situation that they really were going into an office? So, as McNulty says, you'll notice in the present tense, we troop in, all eyes. There's a rack of clothes like a gaggle of hanged women, because it's women's clothes, dresses. Now you'll see there that he's shifted into the present tense. This makes it obviously a lot more immediate, and it's as if he's telling us a story in a pub, and there is also a sense, I think, of this self-consciousness, this desire to entertain, as he uses this gorgeous simile, a rack of clothes like a gaggle of hanged women. So, on the face of it, it's really funny, these sort of, this gaggle of women sort of all congregated together in this cupboard. But then you've got this adjective hanged. So much like the rest of the book, we've got in miniature here the juxtaposition of horror and humour. And he tells us, just in case we'd missed it, because it's women's clothes. And again, he repeats the idea in this sort of syntactical fragmentation. Dresses. There was nothing else there. And we looked around thoroughly, we did. So, you've got a sense of these boys who are utterly flummoxed about what they're being asked to do. And we notice here, don't we, that Thomas is strangely perhaps silent. John and Titus Noon, as we're going to discover his name is, the owner of the saloon, they do the talking. So Thomas is present, he is referred to, but he communicates this story to us through what other people are saying, and that aligns us as the reader with him. We listen as he listens. And John Cole expresses both their incredulity and ours, really, as readers, going, we're not women. I, in that non-standard English, is a boy, and so is Thomas here. And then we get the lovely, fluent explanation from Titus, who explains that there are no women, and you notice that the women here are defined in terms of their menfolk and their menfolk's professions. One is the storeman's wife and the stableman's little daughter. And he allays perhaps our fears about what these boys are going to be involved in, with our 21st century perspective of putting what is essentially children literally into the arms of men. Could leave us kind of really quite worried. But no, as he gives us that lovely list, doesn't he, of of all the things that this isn't. It's not kissing, cuddling, feeling or fumbling. And then he uses superlatives, a couple there, just to emphasise how lovely this dancing is. It's the nicest and it's the most genteel. We're reminded of Thomas's diminutive stature. He is the smaller one, and he's been referred to as that before. And but he reassures John, and he uses this curious mix of registers again, doesn't he? This sort of mix of very formal and very informal. So, we've got Thomas's description of John Cole's newly acquired professional pride coming up again. Then he cocks an eyebrow, interrogatory like. We know, don't we, because Thomas again explains a lot to us throughout the book about what he knows is important, and he's already referred to his great learning that John Cole doesn't have. So they exchange a look, and Thomas says, "I didn't care. It was better than starving in a wheat sack." So we know again through this motif of clothes that Thomas is wearing this wheat sack, perhaps significantly already as a skirt. He seems to gravitate naturally to women's clothes, and he finds them really comfortable. We go back without any introduction at all to the voice of Titus Noon, and he gives us this anaphora of intentions, again without a subject, without a pronoun, reflecting obviously the way that he speaks. He's going to put a bath in, and he's going to give soap, and he's going to supply the underwears. And then he uses a little bit of the Spanish, which he might have picked up in St. Louis, and certainly it's an indication of the time that we're in, because we've already heard how he intends to make a few bucks along the way in the grand American way, obviously pursuing the American dream, and he is the embodiment of that. And so just at the end of that little bit, just to finish our introduction here, we can see that we've got another voice there. Thomas keeps his voice to being the older narrator, and he says that we trooped out again, shrugging our shoulders, as if to say it was a mad world, but a lucky one. And then he describes in quite sort of lyrical, poetical terms almost, the different places where they sleep, in how many bowers. Well, a bower is an attractive dwelling, and it's got sort of connotations perhaps almost of a medieval lady, before sleep in our army days, out on the prairie, in lonesome declivities. Well, I had to look that up, as you can see there in my annotations, and it means, in case you didn't know either, that it's a downward slope. We like to repeat that, John and me, over and over, and never failing in our laughter. 50 cents each. So the repetition of the figure really underlining just what vast wealth this seemed to be for these two young boys. Likewise, we've got this structural sense of time moving around, and he begins the next bit by referring to the lost history of the world, which this extract comes from. Okay, I'll leave it there. That's extract number 2, and we'll come to the main passage in a moment.